This is Nellie Bly, the face of a woman who would change journalism forever. On May 8th, 1864, Elizabeth Cochran Seaman was born.
In 1885, Elizabeth read a newspaper article called "What Girls Are Good For." It argued that working women were immoral. Elizabeth wrote an anonymous letter to the paper, vigorously arguing that women could help support a family in need.
Elizabeth started to write and was hired for the newspaper company she wrote to and chose the pen name Nellie Bly. Eventually, Nellie got a job at the New York World.
And now Nellie's first assignment was to get committed to the asylum on Blackwell's Island, called Roosevelt Island. Nellie used the pseudonym Nellie Brown during her time in the asylum, as it agreed with her original initials.
At home, Nellie practiced looking insane in the mirror to help with the facade. So I flew to the mirror and examined my face. I remembered all I had read of the doings of crazy people, how first of all they have staring eyes. And so I opened mine as wide as possible and stared unblinkingly at my own reflection. I assure you the sight was not reassuring, even to myself, especially in the dead of night. I tried to turn the gas up higher, in hopes that it would raise my courage. I succeeded only partially, but I consoled myself with the thought that in a few nights more, I would not be there, but locked up in a cell with a lot of lunatics, wrote Bly. Bly decided that she should go to a temporary home for women to pretend to be crazy because she knew that the cops would surely be called.
And the cops were called. After Bly started saying nonsense about how everything was so sad and that she missed her missing trunks, the police offered to help Nellie find her things. Miss Standard, the leader of the home, talked to the police about Nellie's strange behavior. Nellie pretended to not know where she came from and kept insisting that she only wanted to find her trunks.
I don't know what to do with the poor child, said the worried judge. She must be taken care of. Send her to the island, suggested one of the officers. Oh, don't, said Mrs. Stannard, in evident alarm. Don't! She is a lady, and it would kill her to be put on the island. For once I felt like shaking the good woman. To think the island was just the place I wanted to reach, and here she was, trying to keep me from going there. It was very kind of her, but rather provoking under the circumstances, Nellie wrote. The officers thought Nellie had been drugged, so she was taken to Bellevue Hospital, where she was pronounced insane. Just then, an officer came in with a reporter. I was so frightened, and I thought I would be recognized as a journalist, so I turned my head away and said, I don't want to see any reporters. I will not see any. The judge said I was not to be troubled. Well, there is no insanity in that, said the man who had brought the reporter, and together they left the room. Once again I had a fit of fear. Had I gone too far in not wanting to see a reporter, and was my sanity detected? If I had given the impression that I was sane, I was determined to undo it, so I jumped up and ran back and forward through the office, Mrs. Stannard clinging terrified to my arm. I won't stay here! I want my trunks! Why do they bother me with so many people? And thus I kept on until the ambulance surgeon came in, accompanied by the judge, wrote Bly. She was taken to the psych ward, where the beds were hard, windows iron barred, and the pillows stuffed with straw. Nellie was freezing the entire night. The patients were hardly given any food, and what little they got was bitter and disgusting. The next morning, Nellie was taken to Blackwell's Island Asylum by boat. A woman who went with her, named Louise Schanz, could only talk in German. When nobody knew how to speak German, Mrs. Schanz was pronounced insane. Nellie was interviewed by a doctor whose nurse didn't even know how to measure height or weight. Nellie was taken to a bathroom where she was told to undress. She was put into a freezing cold bath. Nellie was washed. Buckets of cold water were poured over her. There were only 16 doctors on staff at the asylum, and the asylum held 600 more patients than it was built for. Inmates were forced to sit still on benches without talking or moving for an upwards of 12 hours. Some patients were tied together with rope and forced to pull carts around like donkeys. Anyone who complained or resisted was beaten. After Nellie's 10 days in the asylum, Nellie's editor arranged her for release. She got out and published the expose, titled 10 Days in a Madhouse. When Nellie's expose was published, it immediately became a big hit. An investigation on Blackwell's asylum was done by the grand jury. Many inmates who gave Bly details of horrific treatment had already been released or transferred. The staff of the asylum denied Nellie's accounts. Funds were increased by the grand jury for mental institutions. An abusive staff was fired. Changes were made to the system that claimed people to be insane, and translators were hired to help immigrants. In conclusion, Nellie Bly was the first investigative journalist who exposed the horrid conditions of Blackwell's Island Asylum and helped increase funds for mental institutions. Nellie was seen as a daredevil in her time and broke barriers by being the first investigative journalist.